Well, there you go. What do you make of that, England fans? I've just been watching it here in the Stade de France in Paris ahead of Ireland against Scotland. Endured it more like from an English perspective. A heck of a game though. Much better performance from Samoa, which I'll get into in the video as well. So drop a comment down below. What did you make of this performance from England? Where does it leave you with this team heading into the quarterfinals? They were always qualified, but how are you feeling now about them? Or do you feel kind of what you did before? You know that they're not one of the best teams in this competition. So pop it in the comment section. Also like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Let's get into it. So it was quite funny actually, watching the closing stages of the game here in the press room, and they put it on the big screens in the stadium so that fans that get here early can get themselves in, have a beer and watch the game on the big screens. And the roar from the Irish and Scottish fans as Samoa were attacking late on, and the disappointment when they lost the ball close to the England line was quite funny, and you can't really blame them, because I suppose it would be really easy in this video for me to just focus on England, and don't worry, I'm going to speak about them a lot in it, particularly looking ahead to that quarter-final, and it would be easy for me to focus on them without acknowledging the importance of that match and almost that upset for the tournament. Because those of you that watch a number of the videos on this channel, I've spoken about that New Zealand-Italy was bad for this World Cup, that Italy were really poor against France as well, that we haven't had the upsets that many of us would have craved. And we almost had it there. So even though we didn't get the result that any of the neutrals would have wanted, I think that game and that performance from Samoa was what the competition needed at this stage, and is actually a good thing in a way. From an England perspective, it was absolutely awful. But good on Samoa. They've had a really bad World Cup. I spoke to someone that was at Argentina-Samoa at that game and just said Samoa were awful in it. I think this was a much better performance. They stretched England. They scored some brilliant tries. They had one try disallowed, which I think they were pretty unlucky, and they almost snuck a famous win right at the end. So a nice way for them to end this World Cup campaign, which overall, in terms of results, has been pretty disappointing, but they saved their best till last. But let's get on to England. I mean, the first note that I wrote down watching that game, in the first 15 to 20 minutes when England went 8-0 up, I put down what a difference winning makes, because I thought England looked pretty good in the first 15-20 minutes of that game. All right, they're not one of the best teams in the world, having over the last two nights watched France and watched the All Blacks. I know that their attack is nowhere near the best sides in the world, but they look like a side who were in an awful place coming into the World Cup, that have got a couple of wins, and I thought were growing in confidence. And then the game just completely changed. And I think the big thing actually, which is something we haven't seen teams do to England too much in the pool stages of this World Cup, is spread them wide. We saw it at Twickenham, in particularly the game against Fiji, which they lost there, and Fiji's first victory over England. Stretch this England defence wide, and I think you can get on their edge. If you can offload against them as well, you quickly have them incredibly stretched and find holes in that defence. And that's probably the big concern for England heading forward into the quarterfinals, is they're going to face sides who are much better at attacking than Argentina, Japan and even Samoa. And I worry about their ability to keep those sides out of their red zone and keep them away from scoring loads of points on them. I think, again, Samoa stretched England and they were able to reap the benefits of it pretty nicely. The other disappointing thing from an England perspective is probably linked to that first point, is momentum. You build momentum in the competition. It's why, even though the performance was pretty disappointing, winning, I think, was crucial for England. I know that they were already top of the pool. They were already through. So from that point of view, getting the win didn't necessarily matter. But can you imagine the noise this week if heading into a quarter-final, England were having to look back on a defeat, and the negativity with that, the fact that they would have not only have lost to Fiji for the first time in the last few months, they'd have lost to Samoa for the first time as well. The whole feeling around the England side, having done pretty well in their first three games in this World Cup, to change the feel and the momentum would have all of a sudden got quite negative again. So that's why, actually, even though the performance wasn't very good, the result itself, I think, is really quite important. But it was poor from England. It was shocking, really. They were poor mistakes. They were dropping the ball. They were just leaking silly penalties again. There was all sorts of things that you were just scratching your head thinking, what on earth is going on? I wanted to mention the disallowed tries, though, the Samoan one and also the Ollie Chessum one, because those are two decisions, again, that I'm just left scratching my head when I look at both of those. First of all, the Samoan one, 3 players go up to the ball. Yes, the Samoans' hand is clearly on it, but Itoje's there, Ben Earl is there. Who's really getting the most momentum on it to push the ball in whatever direction it heads in? I think they were pretty unlucky to have that try chalked off, and at that point in the game, that would have been a pretty healthy lead for Samoa. You never know, and I know England later with the Ollie Chesham one had one ruled out, which I thought shouldn't have been ruled out either. Chesham, I think, had been tackled, and they said that he was propelling himself to the line. I think he was just placing it, which you're allowed to do after you're tackled. And the reason I bring those decisions up, because you could view it as it's one decision apiece, it's kind of been levelled out. If we have one of those in a big quarter-final next week, that's where I think it becomes a much, much bigger issue for the competition. I just don't understand how the officials have got to those decisions, but you can let me know if you agree or not in the comments. And I suppose I better mention Owen Farrell because he passed Johnny Wilkinson as England's all-time leading point scorer. It's a tremendous individual achievement. He is a brilliant England player, one of the greats. I know not everyone likes him, he's not winning any popularity contests, but he is a sensational player, and congratulations to him for getting that record. We also saw him run the clock down for the 60 seconds you get for a penalty and have it chalked off, which could have come back to bite England potentially, which was bizarre really. I actually thought he potentially got away with it in the first half. It wasn't quite as blatant as the one we saw in the second, but I was watching it and thinking he was playing a pretty dangerous game with the shot clock in that first half and maybe got away with it, and then he got pinged in the second. But congratulations to Farrell. And I just don't know with England. I don't know. I suppose on the one hand you could say that we haven't learnt a huge amount. It's just reconfirmed the fact that England aren't that great, which we knew coming into the World Cup. Maybe the fact that they've won a couple of games changes the perception a little bit. But that team will view it as they've got through the group, 4 wins from 4, they're top of the pool, and they move on into a quarter-final, most likely against Fiji, that they will feel they are able to win despite having lost to Fiji a week ago. But I think it takes a little bit of the wind out of the sails of England. Yes, they've got the victory, and that's important because boy, oh boy, as I've said already, would the negativity around the squad have increased had they lost. But it's still just probably, it's not a result or a performance that has built upon what we've seen in this World Cup so far from England. I think if they could have put in a more comprehensive performance, then it would have just continued maybe the change in feel around the side. Let's finish with a word on Samoa though, because yeah, it's great for them. We probably expected more from them in this World Cup, in all honesty. When you looked at some of the names that are returning to the team in terms of Lima Sopoaga and Stephen Luatua and players of that calibre, we maybe expected a little bit more from them. They finally showed it in the last game, and it was a little too late for them. But I am pleased that we had the game overall. In terms of the interest of the World Cup, as I've said already, I think it is a positive thing. I just think from an England perspective, it was just poor. It almost reminded me of the 2011 World Cup. I remember we had a number of games where England won, but the whole time you're thinking, wow, boy, that was not very convincing. And then ultimately they got bombed out in the quarterfinals of that World Cup. We'll see how they go next week. They've got the victory. They will try and ride that wave of momentum. But when you're looking to increasingly build upon your performances, put the blocks in place to be successful, I feel that England are struggling to do that. In fact, if you actually look back at the first game, good win against Argentina in tricky circumstances, then an underwhelming, pretty poor performance against Japan. They then obviously do the job against Chile because the disparity in quality is so much. And then again, they maybe don't back it up in the way that we were probably hoping. That's where my disappointment stems from. But England will say they've got the job done, they're top of the pool, and they will move on. I will leave it there. You can drop a comment down below. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.